All right, let's fire up the Wayback Machine and set the coordinates for 1978.
Sounds good to me.
Today we're taking a deep dive into a true gaming icon, Breakout on the Atari 2600.
The classic.
You know that game where you've got that paddle, little ball, and rows of bricks just begging to be smashed?
Right.
But we're going to uncover, I think, that there's a lot more to Breakout than meets the eye,
Definitely.
especially in its Atari 2600 form. What's interesting to me is that Breakout really represents this pivotal moment in gaming history.
I think so too.
It's not just a fun game.
Yeah.
It's like this sign of things to come. So before we jump into the 2600 version, let's take a step back. Breakout got its start in arcades back in '76, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And it was a huge hit. I think the arcade version of Breakout has this pretty interesting connection to tech history. I love those little connections.
Oh yeah, it does.
Can you tell me more?
So a lot of the electronics, like the guts for that original arcade machine, were designed by Steve Wozniak.
Wait, was?
Yeah.
As in the was from Apple?
Yes. The was.
No way.
It makes you wonder if, like, his work on Breakout influenced maybe his approach to design at Apple. Because both really emphasize, like, simplicity and user-friendliness, right?
It's a fascinating thought. I mean, you think about the Apple II, which came out around the same time, and it has that same kind of pick-up-and-play feel that Breakout did.
Totally. And that arcade success was key because it made Breakout, like, a prime candidate for Atari to bring to its new console.
Yeah, that makes sense. Wasn't the technology a big leap, though? I mean, how did they manage to squeeze all that arcade action onto a little cartridge?
It was a challenge. I mean, the Atari 2600 had its limitations, limited memory, a simple processor. But the developers found, some pretty clever ways to work around them. And so they brought Breakout to the Atari 2600 in 1978. It was one of those early titles that helped prove that, like, home versions of arcade games could actually work. And it helped shape, like, the console market as we know it today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Paint me a picture. What was it actually like to play Breakout on the Atari 2600?
Well, first of all, you wouldn't be using the joystick that you might, like, associate with the Atari. Breakout was all about the paddle controllers.
Ah, the paddles. With that satisfying little, like, wheel.
Yeah.
Those were so much more precise than those clunky joysticks.
Right. Those paddle controllers, they gave you a more analog feel, and it was all about, like, subtle movements, made it feel more like you were actually, like, controlling the paddle, which was really crucial because the gameplay, required finesse.
So you're bouncing that ball off your paddle and up toward rows of bricks,
Yes.
aiming to clear them out for points. And if you miss at the ball,
You lose a life.
you lose
Yeah.
life. The tension was real, especially, I imagine, as the ball sped up, right?
Oh, yeah.
Increasing the challenge.
Uh-huh.
And don't forget the difficulty switches on the Atari 2600.
Oh, yeah. The difficulty switches.
You could tweak the game speed, paddle size, and other factors.
Oh, yeah. To really customize the difficulty.
Yeah. What really set the Atari 2600 version of Breakout apart, though, was, like, the variety it offered. It wasn't just one standard game. So what kind of variations are we talking about?
You had your, like, classic standard Breakout mode, but then there was steerable ball, where you could actually, like, influence the ball's trajectory after it bounced off your paddle.
Oh, interesting. So a little more skill involved there.
Yeah, a bit more skill.
What else?
Then there was catch, or sometimes called sticky paddle. That one, the ball would temporarily stick to your paddle, giving you more control over your aim.
Okay, so a nice way to add a bit of strategy to your shots.
Exactly.
What other variations?
There was invisible bricks, which is exactly what it sounds like. The bricks would just become invisible, so you'd have to rely on, like, your memory of the layout or just the sounds of the ball hitting them to play.
Okay, now that is a challenge.
Yeah, that one's tough.
Any other variations we should know about?
Oh, yes. Double or multiple balls would, like, throw multiple balls into the mix at once, which, really ramped up the complexity and the potential for chaos.
Wow, so much variety packed into one cartridge. It's amazing how they managed to pull that off with the technology back then.
It really is a testament to, like, the ingenuity of the developers.
Okay, so we've talked gameplay variations, but what about the technical side of things? What were the limitations of the Atari 2600, and how did Breakout work around them?
Well, you got to remember, this was a time of, like, very limited graphical capabilities and sound. Breakout had those, like, signature boops and bloops for the ball bouncing and bricks breaking. It's all very minimalist, but incredibly effective in creating that, retro gaming atmosphere.
It's crazy how those simple sounds can, like, evoke such strong nostalgia. So, with all this variety and challenge, where did Breakout go from here? Were there sequels?
Well, there was a sequel, Super Breakout, It came out in arcades in 1978, and then on the Atari 2600 in the early 80s.
Yeah.
It took what you loved about Breakout and, added things like power-ups and boss battles.
Cool. So a bit of a step up in complexity. What made it different from the original?
It introduced more advanced elements like multiple balls in play at the same time and, like different compartments to break through. Many players consider Super Breakout, a more advanced and challenging game.
Yeah.
But for a lot of us, I think, the original Breakout still holds a special place as like the classic experience.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. But Breakout also like spawned a whole genre of games.
Oh, you're absolutely right. From Arkanoid to like modern mobile games, Breakout's influence is everywhere. It's widely considered the foundation of, like the entire brick breaker genre.
It's amazing to think that a game like this simple could have such a lasting impact on gaming.
It really highlights the power of a well-designed, core gameplay loop. Breakout nailed that, like, satisfying feeling of skill and progression, and that's something that still resonates with players today.
Well said. So, for anyone who wants to experience a piece of gaming history, is it easy to find an original Atari 2600 Breakout cartridge these days?
It's not particularly rare, which is great news for collectors.
Okay.
You can usually find original cartridges in, retro game stores or online.
And are there any, like, special variations or collector's items to look out for?
You'll find like different label variations.
Okay, cool.
Some with text labels, some with picture labels. There are even like some international versions.
Okay.
Certain versions might be more, sought after than others, but generally Breakout is a fairly affordable and widely available game for, Atari 2600 collectors.
So before we move on, I want to get your take on, like, Breakout's significance in gaming history. What are your key takeaways?
Breakout perfectly captures the essence of like early gaming innovation. It's a testament to how, a simple concept but executed well can have a lasting impact. It paved the way for an entire genre of games, showcased the potential of like home console ports of arcade hits.
Yeah.
It even has a connection to like one of the biggest names in tech history.
It really makes you appreciate how sometimes the most groundbreaking ideas are the ones that are, like, elegant in their simplicity.
I couldn't agree more. Back again for more Breakout.
We've covered a lot of ground already, from its arcade origins to its, various game roads on the Atari 2600. But you mentioned how Breakout spawned like an entire genre of games.
Yeah.
So let's really dig into that a bit more. What is it about this like seemingly simple gameplay loop that has resonated with players for decades?
It's a great question because it seems almost too basic on the surface, right?
Yeah.
Bounce a ball, break some bricks.
Yeah.
It's a big deal. But that's the beauty of it, right? Breakout taps into something fundamental about, I think, human psychology.
Okay.
There's this inherent satisfaction, I think, we get from order and destruction.
Mm-hmm.
Like taking something chaotic and systematically breaking it down.
Yeah. I mean, I can see that. There's a sense of control, a sense of mastery even, as you clear those rows of bricks.
Right.
And it's not just mindless destruction either. You have to think strategically about like angles, timing, how to use the paddle to direct the ball.
Exactly. There's a real skill element that keeps you engaged. You're constantly learning, adapting, trying to improve your technique.
Yeah.
And as you get better, the game, gets faster,
Yeah.
more challenging, pushing you to refine your skills even further.
It's that classic arcade formula, right?
Totally.
Easy to learn,
Yes.
difficult to master. And even when you do master it, there's always that drive to, beat your high score, to achieve that perfect run.
Totally. Yeah. And then there's the visual and auditory feedback.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that satisfying thunk of the ball hitting the bricks, the visual spectacle of those, colorful rows disappearing.
Yeah.
It's simple but effective at creating a sense of, reward and progression.
And those elements have been carried forward into like countless other games in the brick breaker genre, right?
Yes.
Think about Arkanoid, right? It took like the basic Breakout formula
Yeah.
and it added like power-ups, different types of bricks, even boss battles.
Totally. And even today, you see mobile games that are essentially modern takes on Breakout.
Yeah.
They might have fancy graphics and, more complex levels, but that core gameplay loop remains the same.
Yeah.
It's a real testament to the enduring power of this design.
So we've talked about like the gameplay, but let's shift gears a bit and talk about Breakout's cultural impact. It's more than just a game, isn't it?
It's absolutely more than just a game. Breakout is a cultural touchstone. It's a symbol of like the early days of gaming, a time when, things were simpler, more about pure gameplay than fancy graphics or, complex storylines.
Yeah. It's a game that transcends generations.
I agree.
People who grew up playing Breakout on the Atari 2600 can now like share that experience with their kids who might be discovering it for the first time on like a smartphone or something.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a shared experience that connects people across, different ages and backgrounds. And it's also a reminder of like how far gaming has come. When you look at Breakout today, it might seem almost, primitive compared to modern games.
Yeah.
But you got to understand that it was revolutionary for its time.
Absolutely. I mean, it pushed the boundaries of like what was possible in home entertainment. It helped establish like the home console as like a viable platform for gaming and laid the groundwork for the industry we, know and love today. And it's a reminder that innovation doesn't always have to be about like complexity or like cutting edge technology. Sometimes the simplest ideas executed with care and precision can have the most profound impact.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Now, before we wrap up, I want to touch on something we mentioned earlier. Its connection to Steve Wozniak, the co-founder of Apple. It's a fascinating bit of trivia, but it adds another layer of intrigue to this game's history.
It does. To think that like one of the pioneers of personal computing got his start, so to speak, working on an arcade game like Breakout, it's pretty incredible.
It goes to show that you never know where inspiration will strike or how seemingly unrelated experiences might shape a person's path. And in Wozniak's case, his work on Breakout's hardware, undoubtedly honed his engineering skills and likely played a role in his later success with Apple.
It's a great example of how passion and creativity can like lead you down unexpected paths, and it adds a certain mystique to Breakout. It's not just a game, it's a piece of tech history.
Right.
A tangible link to like one of the most influential figures in the digital age.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. It makes you wonder what other like hidden connections or untold stories might be lurking beneath the surface of other classic games.
That's a thought-provoking question. It speaks to like the richness and depth of gaming history. There's always more to discover, more to learn, and more to appreciate about the games that have shaped our culture. Welcome back to, I guess, the final part of our deep dive into Breakout.
Yeah.
I think, we've journeyed through its origins, its gameplay, its technical aspects, and even its cultural impact.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey. I think we've uncovered some pretty fascinating insights along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we wrap things up, I want to circle back to a question that's been kind of, in my mind this whole time. Why does Breakout still matter today? I mean, why should someone, care about a game that might seem, so simple by today's standards?
It's a great question, and I think the answer is that Breakout just taps into something timeless about, being human. It's about that pursuit of mastery, the satisfaction of overcoming a challenge. It's about like that pure joy of achieving something through skill and perseverance. And these are like basic human desires that are always going to be relevant, regardless of how technology changes or how complex games, become.
When you put it like that, it makes total sense. It's that feeling of accomplishment when you finally, break through that last row of bricks, especially after you've been trying over and over.
Right. Exactly. And it's a feeling we all crave, whether it's in, games, sports, music, anything else that makes us push ourselves to improve. Breakout just takes that experience and boils it down to its simplest form.
It's almost like a tiny model of the human urge to, to learn, adapt, and overcome obstacles.
I think there's something else going on here too, though. Breakout, with its kind of stripped-down design, reminds us that sometimes less is more.
I see what you're saying. In a world of games that, keep getting more complex, visually impressive, it's easy to forget, the power of just a simple, well-crafted gameplay loop.
That's it. Breakout is just a reminder that you don't need, fancy graphics or a complicated plot to make a game that people will love. Sometimes just combining the most basic elements, but in the right way, can create something truly magical.
That's a good lesson for game developers today, right?
I think so, yeah.
I mean, it's easy to get caught up in the new technology and everything, but sometimes, going back to basics and focusing on that core gameplay is the key to making a truly memorable experience.
For sure. And I think Breakout also just reminds us that it's important to preserve gaming history. You know,
Yeah.
older games can easily get lost in the shuffle of new releases, but these classics, they deserve to be celebrated and remembered. They're the foundation of today's gaming industry, and they give us a window into how games and technology have evolved over time.
Yeah, that's a great point. So, as we wrap up our deep dive into Breakout, I want to leave our listeners with a question, or I guess more of a challenge. What other classic games deserve a second look? What hidden gems are out there awaiting to be rediscovered? You might even discover your new favorite game along the way. So go out there, explore, and rediscover the magic of classic gaming. Until next time, happy gaming, everyone.